afternoon. Following our schedule on the second International Symposium of Gender and Prisoner Culture, we are opening the parallel session number 3, in which we'll discuss human rights, judicialization of life, criminal procedural guarantees, punitive power, and restorative justice. I'm Rogério Mota. I'm a prosecutor in the state of Tocantins, Brazil, and I'll be hosting and mediating this session. We are going to have 5 presentations on the thematic axis, and all with proficient and pungent studies. I wish a profuse work for all participants and welcome all to our transmission. Well, for the initiation this session, we're going to welcome Giorgio, Pittella, and Giovanni Allegretti, who will present the study Between Today and Tomorrow, Ideas on the Run, in a pioneer experiment of participatory budgeting in the Italian prison of Bollate. I welcome Giovanni and Giorgio. I wish you a profuse study and presentation, and I'll leave to you for the presentation right now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Giorgio Pittella. I'm from Milan, and I'm glad to participate in this panel. And can I share the screen? Yeah.
Yeah, you can share it now. I'll put it on screen.
Okay. And in this panel, my colleague and I are going to present the study on Ideas on the Run, a pioneer experiment of participatory budgeting in a correctional facility in Bollate in Milan. In this project, we were able to get all the inmates to make proposals about their needs during the detention and to decide them. And as a result, we have 18 meetings, male and female youths in the state of Bollate, and 2 general interviews meetings. And in the end of the second phase, we have 670 supporters in the space. And a little focus on the more supported proposals after the support phase. We have in the main woods a job center, and inside and out there is a proposal regards the job supply and demand for the effective integration of prisoners into society, and an animal boarding house run by inmates, completing classroom restyling, and a proposal with transformation of milk and dairy products. In the female wards, we have restoration of the laundry, renovation of the shower, cleaning service, and more equipped and functional kitchens and bar snack bar managed by the inmates. In the co-design phase, everything seems changing because, for example, the first and the second proposal of the male wards merging in the first phase and separated in the second phase because between the inmates the argument, and in many words we have a merge with the ice cream service and snack bar. In the final voting, the results, the final vote is on in the end of September, 2 weeks ago, about. And we have the job center and bridge inside out with 185 votes, and the training course with 142 votes, and computing classroom with 67 votes, and the female votes, the bar in females visiting area, 51 votes, wash, dress, and take away, 25 votes, and 14 votes renovating the shower. And this is the data, the results, and the variation respect the 2 phases, and we can see the less participation due to the SARS-CoV disease, and okay, that's okay. We wonder if there were visible difference between the participation of men and women, and for analyzing the gap, we clustered the proposals into 3 different categories. The first is internal proposal, the proposal for the jailed, the external proposal, the proposal with the the external of the jail, and policy proposal, transformation of the governance or regulation of the prisoner. And we can see the most clustered is the external with 57%. And to see the difference for the two words is that the external proposal are more present in the men's proposals with 63% about, but in the female, woman words are only the 30%. And this difference we can see in the number of the total of supports, because in the men words are the 78%. The 78%, and the external proposal only about 30% in the women words. We try to simplify the review, reintroducing and clustering two mixed categories, both internal and external components, and both internal policy components. And there is no more change, but is relevant changes in the clustering of proposal by the words, because in the female words we have about 30% of internal external cluster, and remain strong the internal proposal. And the same we can see in the supports, because the female, women, we have the 35% of internal external proposal, and remain strong the internal proposal, despite of the men, because the total of supporters in men words are 72%. And we can, in conclusion, we can say the women will focus their needs in internal changes in relation to men focus in the external change. I've finished for my part, and Giovanni? I can see.
And a little bit better what happened. We have to add an element that are a series of questionnaire that is distributed to the voters, and as you can see, almost 30% of voters among the male and 60% of voters among the women filled the questionnaire. We were not sure to be able to reach such a result, but we have been lucky, and so we could get some elements related to what they felt when they were participating to this participatory budgeting, because the main idea originally was to try to help funding entering in prison to respect the priorities of the people that are supposed to be the beneficiaries, because in many cases resources arrive with a name, a target, and directed channels instead of asking to the inmates what are their priorities. So we try to invert this mechanism, and we wanted to know if we reach this goal. So when we asked the view of the participants, we discovered that in relation to some sentences, we imagined to propose them. For example, when we ask, you agree with the sentence, for me participating to ideas on the run is just a way as another to spend spare time, we see that the majority of people do not agree, and some of them are not completely sure. Why this is important for us? Because the impression we have of the majority of program, social and cultural problem done in the prison, as the inmates told us, they don't interest in reality the inmates, but they are lived as a way to show their good behavior in front of the institution. So even when we ask what is your impression about the other inmates, what you think is the way in which they participated to the process, we see that only 40% think that the other inmates did it just for showing good behavior. And this is a positive element in the sense that possibly what we wanted to do has been partially reached, which is the idea of the inmates to feel as protagonists really interested in the process that was happening. You can go further, the next. So when we asked to them if they were doing this process in a way that could benefit themselves, there are some doubts on the fact that possibly is ambiguous, the answer. They, at the same time, they did it for showing off to the prison administration, but at the same time, the majority of them think that this process can favor a better integration of inmates when they will be out of the prison. So what Giorgio was showing about the ideas that project themselves beyond the walls of the prison, we can find this back here in their impression. They think that the ideas are important because they do not only solve problems at the moment, but they can figure out a different future for the inmates, especially those ideas that you saw that project people on training and other possibility of learning skills for the future. You can go further. Another sentence that was important for us among the 50 we have done, but we chose only some, is to see what was the trust in the process, because the process has been difficult. It lasted almost 1 year because the rules of the prison were quite tight, and so was not so easy to do, for example, acts like the inter-ward meetings, so people coming out from their department and going to others, talking with other people. This has been taking a long time in order for being for getting the permission for doing that, but finally we managed it. So we were scared that people was imagining that the length of the process would mean that the process was pre-decided, but as you can see, almost the 60% of them felt that this process was honest, that things were not exactly pre-decided. And facing another question, that is, do you think that the winning priorities will never be implemented? Here, people are a little bit less secure and convinced that the things will finally happen, because they understand that the tight rules that there are, even with all the goodwill of the organizers, could somehow prevent the results to happen. You can go to the next. If we look the difference between men and women in the answer related to the relation with the administration that happened during the period of the project, you can see that more or less there are similarities, more similarities in the way in which they felt the process than in the type of project they needed. The reason is that this is a model prison, so there is a minimum guarantee of something more than a traditional prison in terms of we can call it sort of representative democracy that already pre-existed to this project there. This is a participatory project inside a prison where there was a pre-existing small structure of representation that were the so-called cultural commissions and other commissions which study issues for the improvement of the everyday life of inmates. So you can go. The important is that the majority of people, both men and women, that participated to the process think that in case this type of project can prepare better the capacity of the prison to react, for example, to events like coronavirus. So there is a common view of participants that the degree of dialogue also that was promoted between the inmates is quite high compared to other opportunities they have. Also because there have been permits to do things like inter-ward assemblies that never happened before. So I think that we can register a positive attitudes and this is this questionnaire were distributed in the last phase of the process. So when the year was passed and when results were still not sure, but we see that there is a high degree of trust in the process and in its capacity to go beyond the event itself and produce a positive relation in the relations between the inmates and the prison administration and between the inmates themselves also. And finally, you can go further if you want. Also here, if you look, the difference between men and women are not so substantive as we have seen in the typology of project. More or less, they felt the same. It has to be said that before we could decide to separate men and women, the men told us that they thought that it was the case to create two different channels of participation, not voting for the same priorities, because they realized that the majority of facilities that exist in the prison are in the men area, which counts on 1,000 inmates in relation to the female that count around 200 inmates. So if the majority of equipment are in the male area, they thought that women would have the right to have their own process, because possibly they were going to decide to prioritize things a little bit different. This is exactly what happened. You can finish, I think, is the last slide. Yes, so in the end, if we want an open conclusion, we noticed that the environment determined a different decision making, very different decision making in terms of typologies of proposal in the two macro clusters, so the male wards and the female wards. On the other side, the type of process was felt with positive attitudes in the same way in the two different cluster of wards. So this reconfirmed to us that was very important to separate men and women, and we are happy that the typologies of things decided in the process show us that it's possible to go beyond a binary division between things to do here and now and things to do for the future, because in the end, the decision were taken around things that at the same time serves for individual development, but also solve some factual problems that exist in the way the prison answer to the needs of improvement of daily life in the institution. So this is a little bit our conclusion. Nothing exceptional, but something which is comforting us for the future. And in fact, in this moment, we are negotiating with the Ministry of Justice and a series of other prisons that the B-Part Association convinced to invest in the future on similar processes. And that's why we did this study with detailed feedback by the prisoner, because we wanted to create something that could show evidence-based results that could convince other prisons to go on the same path. Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if Giorgio wants to add something. I thank you again.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Giorgio, for your brilliant presentation. I'm always amazed by how the environment on the prisons has so many differences from country to country, but have a lot of similarities too. And seeing your study in Italy, I certainly found a lot of similarities in the prison system here in Brazil, my country. Thank you for your presentation. Congratulations on your study.
And thank you again for allowing us to speak as first, because I'm going to take my plane finally to reach the capital in this strange ice frozen country.
That's no problem at all. We thank you for your participation.
If there are questions, Giorgio will be able to answer. Okay.
Yes. I forgot to say that, but I'll reserve all the questions. I reserve a time in the end for debates and all the questions. Okay.
Giorgio, we also represent the entire team point of view. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Following our schedule, I'd like to invite Claudia Mantovan and Caterina Peroni that will present her study on genders entrapped, an empirical study on transgender inmates in Italy. I wish you the best of luck, and we are eager to hear what you to tell us. Are you hearing me? Are you okay? You have screens to share, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am trying, but
I'm not seeing here your screen. Can you share it?
I am trying, but I go on share, but it doesn't work. I'm trying again. Caterina, can you try to share your screen, because I am not able.
Anna's here to save you.
I will try. Hello, everyone. You need to select share screen, and then you need to. Okay, Caterina, it's working. Yes, I am sharing your screen. And I will remove me from the screen. Okay.
Thank you, Anna.
Have a nice presentation. Thank you.
Well, we're all set. I'll remove me too, and it's up to you. Thank you.
Okay. This paper.
I'm sorry, your mic is muted. I don't know what happened. Did you remove your mic or something? I'm not being able to unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. So research of transgender prisoners in Italy. In Italy, transgender inmates are present in 8 prisons who have set up specific protective wings for this type of prisoners. These sections are located inside the male prisons, with the exception of Florence, where the transgender prisoners are placed inside the female area. In this presentation, we are going to analyze the perception of their condition in prisons by the transgender people and the ways in which they try to maintain their gender identity in a context of imprisonment. Okay, next. Within Italian prison, it seems to have been, over the years, a progressive awareness of the importance of granting transgender prisoners the opportunity to protect their gender identity, allowing them to continue the intake of hormones even in prison, and to be able to access the clothes and accessories they need to confirm their self-representation as women. These improvements, however, does not seem entirely satisfactory because several interviewees have stressed having problems procuring clothes, accessories, female twigs, and their doses of hormones due to the fact that they cannot pay them, or because of the incomplete collaboration of the prison staff. The difficulty of obtaining in prison all the tools in terms of clothing, accessories, hormonal treatment, essential to continue to perceive and self-represent as a subject characterized by a strong femininity, or as Goffman would say, the deprivation of the identity kit, constitutes a genuine aggression to one's own self, very difficult to be managed on a psychological level. Next. The aggression to the gender self-representation of the transgender prisoners, moreover, are not only constituted by elements that act on the body, but also by verbal attacks that act on the psychological level, connected to the non-recognition by others of their gender identity. If compared to the past, the prison staff has made some steps forward in this sense. In fact, but there is still much to do, as evidenced by these testimonies, for example, which highlights how a part of the prison staff continues to perceive transgender prisoners as men, or as a carrier of a pathology, or as a prostitute. Okay, you can go. The aggressions to one own self suffered by transgender prisoners generate, in some cases, phenomena of self-aggressiveness and or heteroaggressiveness. This latter is responsible for the numerous cases of jealousies and quarrels between the transgender prisoners, who often have at stake the affirmation of their femininity through the denial of that of others. This is a phenomenon also found in other studies, for example, that of Sarah Fenstermaker and Valerie Jens concerning 315 transgender prisoners in California. Interesting in this regard, this testimony of an interviewee who says that in fact one of the greatest threats to her gender identity was posed by another transgender inmate. Episodes like this one reveal an unexpected and dysfunctional effect on concentrated transgender prisoners in special sections, presented as a tool to better protect their gender identity and their gender self-identification, as well as to protect them from abuse by common inmates and not to create unrest in prison. This protective custody may instead generate particular internal conflicts. Next. The reality is that the population identified by the prison administration under the heading transsexual prisoners is more heterogeneous than it might seem, primarily with regard to gender identity, but also concerning social class, geographical origin, and related legal status, etc. Here, the perverse effect that the protection of minority policies can have, the artificial creation of a category that is perceived as homogeneous, and that as such the institutions claim to protect, but which include people who have multiple elements of diversity among them, which are disregarded, highlighting the importance of adopting an intersectional approach. Okay, next. A last problematic aspect emerged from the research with reference to the protected sections for transgender is the fact that these actually constitute a segregation with respect to the rest of the prison community. The interviews confirmed that there is a separation with the other prisoners, except for rare exchanges. Some inmates have complained about this isolation and this forced cohabitation, in fact, with a few other transgender people, especially when they are in the small sections and or during the period when in this section are present a few prisoners. Okay, I have finished. Caterina can continue.
Okay, so Just a moment. Okay. Okay, thank you, Claudia. All the issues emerging from the fieldwork described by Claudia define what Opera defined the continuum of gender-based violence and racism affecting transgender people outside and inside the prison. We have seen aggression to gender identity, no recognition of gender and sexual identity, the denial of hormones and women's accessories in order to be recognized as transgender people, the competition between inmates forced by the binary system of the prison, and lastly, the segregation and isolation due to the prison system and the exceptional situation in which transgender people in a binary system, heterosexual system like prison, are living. All these issues are composing what was called the prison governmentality, drawing from Foucault governmentality. Prison governmentality, according to Lambold and other scholars, is composed by dynamics of power knowledge, which on one side work through the confession regime, meaning the systems of classification, pathologization based on the sexual and gender differences, for which transgender inmates have continuously to define themselves according to their sexual identity, and they are continuously misgendered according to their social and cultural identity. As you can see in this excerpt, this is one of the inmates we interviewed. She says, when they told me, all of you, you are mentally ill. This is the result of the process of pathologization and medicalization that affects trans people commonly, but moreover within the prison, in a very strict system of control and classification. The other side of power knowledge dynamics in the prison governmentality is the ignorance, meaning that no recognition of this difference that exceed the binary system of heterosexuality. In this kind of negation, denial of the existence of at least a third gender within the prison, we can see how inmates, transgender inmates, live this kind of not only discrimination but denial of existence. Here, the inmates says the strongest discrimination was when they told me, as long as you have the male organ, you are a man for us. You are a man, denying totally the gender identity of transgender people. On the other side, as we know, Foucault, when talking about the biopolitics, governance, and power, describe these dynamics as a continuous tension with resistance. And also within the prison, we can find some kind of resistance where possible. Of course, because the prison, as we know, is a very controlled and oppressive system. However, trans inmates build up some kind of resistance through sort of recognition, bypassing and reflecting the real deal. The real deal is the real women, were kind of a representation of the perfect heterosexual women to which trans inmate would like to appear. So the passing is one of the strategies of resistance by the transgender inmates, and they really feel and want to be recognized as women, and they behave like women in a daily practice. Another kind of resistance is that of alliances and solidarity. In order to overcome the isolation and segregation in which often transgender people are segregated within the prison, and alliances, sisterhood, sexual relationships between inmates are kind of strategies of resistance to this kind of oppressive system. This is another inmate who was talking about another prison in which she was engaged, and she says, I was with those friends of mine, I cooked, I ate, we went out. Then there were the guys who sent us the cards, cigarettes, and a year flew over there. Meaning that this kind of relationships helps trans inmates to resist to isolation and segregation. Finally, just some suggestions from our research is to frame all this kind of governmentality, segregation, isolation, control of transgender people within the frame of trans abolitionism, especially in Anglo-Saxon scholarship. A lot of activists and scholars studied the situation of transgender inmates in the United States and in other countries, and they radically criticized the system of the captive genders within the heterosexual prison and the binary system, social system. So for this kind of scholarship, this system cannot be corrected, but we have to look outside the prison on society and change the heteronormative order of relationships and of building gender identities and relationship, and to challenge heterosexuality and gender normativity. And this is what we would like to propose to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Caterina. Thank you, Claudia, for shining light on this important matter that traverses all regions of the globe and are being faced with the systems. All systems on the world are being faced with this issue. Thank you for your presentation. Following this presentation by Claudia and Caterina, I welcome now Carolina de la Torre. Hey, Carolina.
Hi.
Good afternoon. Carolina will talk to us about her work called Penal Institution as Anticipatory Spaces. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'll share your screen right now. Have a nice presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the International Symposium on Gender and Prison Culture for having me. My name is Carolina, and I will be discussing penal institutions as anticipatory spaces. Para los que hablan español o portugués, también hablo, entonces si tienen alguna pregunta o comentario, pueden ponerlo en YouTube, no hay problema. For anyone that speaks Spanish, you can put comments and questions as well. I speak too. So today I'm going to be talking, and I'm going to answer the question of what is anticipation and what can it bring to the study of prisons. So I'll first answer these questions, but then I will go into an example of how this can be used from my recent master's thesis. So what is anticipation? Well, anticipation first starts with affect. It starts with an emotion. It sees, maybe you have a thought, or you have a stimulus, for example, seeing a cloud. I look outside every morning to see if I should bring an umbrella or not. And this action that I'm doing is actually working within anticipate. This is what anticipation is. Anticipation is an affective state in which we have situated ourselves temporally. And so it resides at the intersection of temporal and affective politics. This is a growing field of study. At the moment, it's fairly recent, but it's a very multidisciplinary group. There are scholars coming from finance, genetics, biothreats, looking at all sorts of different futures, worst case scenarios, best case scenarios, and so on. So this is quite an interesting new field of discipline, a more recent field of discipline. So in this temporal and affective politics, you have several different tensions going on. So you, as yourself, are situated in the present, but you are in a way held hostage to the future, where your actions are being defined by what could or could not be in the future, but also are perhaps dictated by what has happened in the past. You're also looking at what Appadurai was looking at as a tension of probability and possibility, or what Adams, Murphy, and Clark call the actual and the speculative, where there are certain futures that have a higher likelihood, yet there are other futures that may actually circumvent those because of their gravity or because of some kind of affect that we're looking to avoid or gain. And within these types of futures that we are thinking about, you also have futures of avoiding the worst, which can be in the realm of a probable worst or a possible worst, something that's not likely but is within the realm of imagination. And you also have futures where you're seeking the best, where you're thinking of the most likely outcome for the most amount of people, or seeking the best for an individual or an institution or state. So from the literature, I wanted to bring a few things from anticipation studies about how they define it and what we see that it brings to the table. First and foremost, it's a scheme for organizing and analyzing the social realities that confront us, and a way of orienting and directing our efforts. And for me personally, I see that as orienting our lens, our perspective in how we are analyzing data and how we are looking at our research projects, but also as a non-academic and looking at how we are engaging with the world, with our communities, and with society at large. Also, something that's important that anticipation brings, it brings this idea, it gives us a bit of a reminder here about the realities of moral economies. What all speculations share is the orientation towards and claim to the future as that which matters. Anticipation is a moral economy. So it's thinking about, if I have a claim to the future, who am I to claim it? And for whom am I claiming this future? So it's very much looking at balances and imbalances of power. As such, this is an apt heuristic to examine new modes of logics of governance, security, and subjectivity. So within the penal context itself and penal studies, we do have some hints of looking at anticipation, even if it's not the main lens that's happening. But as was mentioned before, Goffman, in his work on asylums, I'm going to be quoting him as well, he writes that to say that inmates of total institutions have their full day scheduled for them is to say that all their essential needs will have to be planned for. So in depriving someone of their liberty and restricting their space, you're also restricting, the prison is also restricting access to be able to complete those needs. And those needs must be met to survive, unless you're in a situation of necropolitics, of live and let die. But the prison essentially is responsible for filling those. And those needs can include food, water, bed, safety, but also in adhering to certain standards, refraining from torture, providing healthcare during a time like COVID, also providing safe and effective working conditions for staff, making sure that they're paid properly, that they're not working, that they're not overworking, and that they are content in their work. But also adhering to standards may be brought on by public opinion as well. And in terms of moral economies, this is not something that is new to penal research. So two examples are coming from Alison Liebling and Didier Fassin, where they are looking at how the moral economies interact within prison. And this can happen from a level of top-down, of institution to inmate, but it can also happen among inmates as well. So for my MA thesis, I conducted a non-local institutional ethnography of re-entry and carceral care. So I'm going to break that down a little bit because these terms might be new to some of us. It was new to me. So non-local is essentially this idea that normally in participant observation in anthropology, you have the person participating physically in a space, in an activity, in a conversation. What a non-local ethnography does is that it takes the physical need, the need for physicality, out of the situation. And so this can be done, or Gregory Feldman that developed this technique, he uses it to study apparatus or dispositif, looking at penal power, looking at migration power, looking at state power, essentially. And it's an alternative to using participant observation. Rather than relying on people's testimonies and people's thoughts and experiences, you're looking at what is written within documents, what is in larger discourses, both happening in person, but also on paper. And for my research, I also brought in Anneliese Ryle's methods of using documents not just as object, but also as method in itself. So in that case, for example, when you have people that you are interviewing, you tend to ask them, hey, is there someone else I can interview? And you have your snowball sampling. With documents, you can't ask anybody anything because it doesn't talk back. However, documents, especially policy and laws, tend to cite other policies and laws and reports. And so that was something that I was able to do, is to go through each document and to find snowball sampling throughout. And this gave me quite an interesting sample of policies, laws, plannings, architectural plans, all sorts of different documents that are prepared for preparation or planning and look at the future. I chose to specifically focus on re-entry as a certain future because in Switzerland, most people that go to prison will be leaving. And so I wanted to see how the institutions in Geneva specifically were preparing for that re-entry or that release. And finally, I used the idea of carceral care rather than rehabilitation or rather than rehabilitation, because care is something that goes within certain ethical standards. It's a certain a certain legal standard that cannot be ignored. And if a prison does ignore it, it's found liable. Whereas if someone has not been rehabilitated or habilitated, there's not really any accountability on the prison side. That's more a responsabilization that's made to be a responsabilization of the inmate. So I was doing this documentary analysis of all of these different documents put together and putting them in conversation to see whose futures were being anticipated and what kinds of futures. This method had some definite advantages and disadvantages. It allowed me to access institutional ethnography. It allowed me to study up, as Nader says, or has written. This was actually before the confinement. So this actually worked quite nicely for me because I was already having difficulties getting access. So this was a way of using already published materials. I didn't have to ask any requests for information. I was only checking on websites and laws that are publicly available. And so access was not an issue. This also lended itself well to discourse analysis, so it was extremely helpful in that sense, as documents are filled with words, but also with images. This allowed me to compare trajectories over time, so multiple different types of subjectivities that were created and seeing how they went through over about a 10-year period of documents. And this also gave insight on the penal apparatus, looking at subjectivity, biopower, politics, and how the state was looking at its subjects in prisons. Certain limitations that came from this is that there was no input from actors. This definitely would have been interesting, but as a method, I wanted to experiment with this and see what kind of information I could glean just from the documents alone. Also, in doing this, there was also a certain assumption that an institution or that the state functions as a logical, coherent, unified actor. That is not the case. The state and institutions are made up of many different actors with many different positions, perspectives, and it's not always coherent or unified. So this is not to say that the institution is acting as one coherent unit, but it is simply to say that there is an official stance that comes out of laws and policies. And finally, another limitation or a bit of a reminder was that policy is not lived reality. So just because policy dictates that something should happen does not mean that it actually happens. So in my findings, whose futures were planned and anticipated, and what futures were in store? Predominantly, most of the documents were talking about male detainees, and they do make up 95% of the prison population. And so it was mostly directed at the male population. And then the policies themselves, actually, the canton had written out their three main priorities in terms of groups that they were focusing on re-entry. The first was the resident, the second non-resident with authorization, so someone that maybe has a visa but not a residential permit, and then non-residents without authorization, so someone that might have overstayed their visa, overstayed their permit, or might not have gotten authorization in the first place to enter. The other who that really jumped out of the documents was staff. There had been several years of discontent due to overcrowding, and so working conditions were not good. And so staff had been expressing for several years that this was not feasible to work under these conditions, and they had also protested and boycotted, and this was affecting the functionality of the prison. So we saw in penal policy how they were continuing to get more attention. In terms of what futures being anticipated, for the biggest majority of policy, they were talking about education and job training. This primarily had a focus on manual and artisanal work. There wasn't any kind of straying from that. And so that in terms of possibility and probability, Switzerland does not have a large manual artisanal job market. So this was a bit interesting to find that even though a job was being offered, it's very limited to a not very likely job market. And this was available mainly for residents and non-residents with authorization. For those without authorization, the main future that was being prepared was voluntary deportation. And I say voluntary because part of penal, the policies were to sensibilize immigrants to the fact that they were going to be deported, whether they consented or not, but that they had the option to volunteer. So the idea was to make programs that made this more attractive. There were also two programs that were brought in by nonprofits, parenting program and restorative justice mediation. And this brought in two other who's. One was women. This was the only time that women were mentioned in penal policy, so that was a very interesting note. And also in restorative justice mediation, this also brought in a new who of victims. And both of these are pilot projects, and so we'll see what happens with that. And finally, to try to address staff's discontent and to try to beef up the programs that are currently available, the canton was looking to build a new prison. Last week, it was actually terminated, the possibility to make this new prison, so we will be seeing different developments soon. So to conclude, anticipation, what it can bring is that it brings a new perspective on what prisons do and how they do it. It also allows us to examine logics and practices over time, and it allows us to unpack moral economies in punitive spaces. For further reading, there are some articles there on anticipation, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina. It was a well-fed study. I certainly would like to read your dissertation if you can make it available to us. Is it possible?
Yeah, I can. If you would like to.
No, it's just because I don't have your contact information yet, so I don't know if I'll be able to reach you, and I really want to read your dissertation. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Following our program, I welcome now Rhiannon Williams, and let me find her. She was here just a moment ago. I'm not finding her anymore.
No, Joana.
Is Joana out of the streaming?
I don't know.
Fine. Yeah, I think maybe she disconnected or something. Well, if she comes back, I'll put her on the streaming. Okay. Welcome, Rhiannon. Rhiannon will be talking to us about contradictions in international judiciary cooperation instruments, the case of the European arrest warrant, its pitfalls and solutions. Is that right?
It's absolutely perfect. Gosh, I'm glad that you read out the title and not me, because it's a long title.
I'll put your PowerPoint presentation here, and it's up to you. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much, Rogério, and thanks very much for the invitation to speak the International Symposium on Gender and Prison Culture, and also to listen to the 3 previous participants in this session, because they all had really fascinating takes, and I look forward to the discussion later. So as you can see, we are taking a slightly different lens now, but still also within the framework of prison culture, and always within the framework of gender, because this is one of the key human rights issues that form part of the texture of the European Union. And it's a project that we've worked together on with Joana Pastola, who might pop in later, and Pedro Liberado from IPS in Portugal, and with my colleague Torben Adams. We are from the Bremen Ministry of Justice and Constitution in Germany. Bremen is the smallest of the federal states in Germany, but each of the federal states has their own Ministry of Justice and Constitution. So that's just a bit of context for you. Okay. So we, as a backdrop to this discussion, or this session, sorry, we will contextualize the European arrest warrant a little bit for you. So Europe, on the one hand, sees itself as a normative actor. That means that the European Union aims to change the standards and prescriptions of practice of the European member states, and consequently of the institutions and people working within them, with a set of shared beliefs which are principled, and the member states should adhere to them, and an example should be set with each of these beliefs. As such, it is presenting a sort of regional human rights regime. It doesn't sound very attractive, but that's in effect what it is, which then takes on a global role in the human security discourse. And this is where we will focus our discussion today. And this, on the one hand, compared to the more 21st century security concerns, which have a dynamic effect on how Europe reacts within this discourse. This is taking into account the open borders of Schengen, especially as more European member states join the Union, and also the need for further institutional and legal harmonization. Because, I mean, even within Germany, we have 16 different ministries, but you can imagine as this expands to 27 member states, the harmonization is a really strong point and needs constant attention. So here's the balance then between the maintenance of security on one hand, and respecting the human rights and promoting itself as an actor in this field on the other. So hopefully we've got a bit of a backdrop to this discussion now. So in come these at the beginning of the 21st century, but also the preparation, the groundwork for these were laid much beforehand. And come these judicial cooperation tools, such as the EAW. I see I haven't written in full here because in my mind it's just an acronym now, but it's the European Arrest Warrant, which is seen as an innovative and flexible judicial cooperation mechanism. So this is the framework name for 2002. It's 584, and it addresses this gap between these different spheres of security. And the aim of the tool is, and it does, to simplify and accelerate the extradition process. So if somebody is suspected or convicted within the European member states and is they can be extradited much quicker than before, whereas before there used to be a whole series of protocols that would be resolved bilaterally between member states if they were in a position where they needed to move somebody from one legal system to the other. So, and it is applauded for its technical precision, and it has an apolitical nature, and it is just a simple but pure judicial tool, and it's based on the mutual recognition of each other's legal systems and on mutual trust. It does limit the member states' ground for refusing extradition, and it's in this sense levels the playing field and exchanges and allows exchanges to take place in a more transparent way. And in doing so, it allows for the reinforcement of human rights standards, so that we have an overarching fundamental procedural rights to detention conditions, such as the establishment of the minimum standards for the rights of for observing a fair trial. So in that sense, it addresses both points on the European agenda, the common adherence of standards on the one hand, and a simpler and more flexible response to national threats as they appear on the other hand. One example of this would be the extradition of Hussein Osman, who was the suspect of the failed London bombings in 2005, and this happened extremely quickly, but it did not necessarily, and there are further examples as well, mean that each of the individuals had full respect for their human rights. And in fact, as the European arrest warrant gets more and more used, and we have more and more examples, there have been recent evolutions, and the overall progress against the backdrop of human rights has meant that there have been several unoptimal hindrances or obstacles for the implementation of this tool. So what does it all lie on? We put forward that this is this is one of the basic and now accepted issues, is the lack of trust, and specifically the worry that tools like the European arrest warrants are going to be used for one government against another government for political leverage, so that we have national judicial structures and cases which are very context specific, which really stop tools like the European arrest warrant being used. And part of this is that the one state, European member state, might not have any or enough knowledge of how the legal systems are proceeding of the other member state, and so they tend to just simply see this as completely obtuse, and it's a really huge functional barrier to the efficient use of the instrument. So this is further aggravated by a weakened mutual trust, which characterizes the national judicial exchanges amongst the member states. And this is another example, which everybody I'm sure is familiar with, the Spanish extradition request for Puigdemont, which was directed at Belgium in 2018 and continues to be a point of political and legal and judicial concern even up to the present day, and it illustrates how quickly how the European arrest warrant may quickly become very politically charged to move Puigdemont from one member state to another. So whereas we thought we had a very precision based and transparent tool, it seems to be easy to instrumentalize, and we are getting more and more examples of this. So it strays from its original conception, and then therefore hindering the respect to the right to a fair trial, or even avoiding procedure entirely. So we came to this, I say we, but the Ministry of Justice in Bremen came to this project with the conditions of detention specifically in mind. Excuse me. We noticed that detention conditions were often disregarded by the executing state, and this goes against a number of international conventions, but for us, we would generally refer to the European prison rules, and violates, and it in turn violates the right to be free from ill treatment in the prison that you're being transferred to. There isn't a mechanism in place to check that everything that the receiving member state has said is going to be the case is actually the case, and there isn't a way to review or process or re-examine the pre-charge detention cases once they've been processed. Now, ignoring these two elements, the issuing state needs to have an extensive period of pre-trial detention in order to try to find out what the prison conditions are going to be like, and whether they're going to be the checks and balances in place that they require. And this means that the person is incarcerated for much longer than might originally have been the case, and therefore it goes counter to the principles of the European Stockholm Roadmap for Procedural Rights, and leads to a lack of accountability. What is the European minimum standards? This is the huge question which lies behind it. There is a lack of clarity, although it is clear. It is clearly laid out. It should be said that there's a different interpretation of it and different ways of identifying that the minimal standard has been actually met within the prison and the prison conditions. And then so confusion builds up over what type of information you need to ask for, and what type of information you can ask for, what type of information is not acceptable for a judge to request, and how exactly the receiving state needs to respond to each of these requests, depending on a case-specific basis. There have been European-led initiatives in the area of criminal judicial cooperation, such as the European Arrest Warrant, which were aimed at reducing the number of human rights violations, but it now seems that the common standards they seek to encourage are not exactly turning out to be implemented. So again, we went on before this project to look at how the bilateral dialogue and the research projects aim to increase on a one-to-one basis, and also with a network, the learning and exchange on the European Arrest Warrant framework, so as to increase simultaneously colleagues' understanding of each other's legal challenges, and reports such as Eurojust's point out what is commonly becoming known, that one of the key implementation barriers is the verification of imprisonment, and also the dialogue about how you can and you cannot approach different authorities, and who to approach on the exchange of national case law. And this gives value to the bringing of judicial practitioners to see the first-hand conditions of imprisonment in the partner country. So here you have an idea that there is some blaming and shaming between specific member states, and this leads to the polarization of prison structures within Europe, so that you can be sent to country X but not country Y in order to stop you from being put into a prison that is seen as not acceptable or not up to standard. We looked at countermeasures to ensure that human rights are not left behind. This includes stronger investments on knowledge, and also upskilling for targeted interventions on the barriers to the European arrest warrants implementation. We have we tried to implement here a layered approach to the known implementation barriers, and this basically means that we tried to work with different communities who are implementing them to ensure a wider uptake and a more interconnected uptake as well between the different framework decisions that are being used. We wanted to be very pragmatic in our approach, and this is how we focused on the idea of awareness, so being more aware of not just of the framework decision itself and the tool and how to use it, but also of the issues that you could come across and how to avoid, overcome, or approach these in the right way according to what the request is. We are in this project which aims to improve the implementation of the European arrest warrant via training and knowledge networks for partners. We are a public body and ministry. We are accompanied in Romania by the Superior Council of Magistracy, who supports judicial training. IPS in Portugal is a, I see my time's up, is a research institution supporting us with access to the Portuguese judiciary, and Antigone in Italy as a human rights organization, which is responsible for the European Prison Observatory. So we try to have all our bases covered within the partnership. We also had an advisory council which supports our project aims, and we chose these specific countries because each of these are high users of the European arrest warrant tool. So they have a lot of issues of arrest warrants, and also as executives of the tool. So they know both sides of the coin. We planned the workshops. We brought together our participants, which were mostly judges, but also public prosecutors, academics, and lawyers, over 3 days with a prison visit in the middle, so that they could actually go. We have actually been to Bremen, and we've seen walked through the prison. We've seen exactly how it works, what a cell looks like, how someone is restrained, how where the canteen is, exactly what it looks like, and we plan to do the same in 2 other countries, that is Romania and in Portugal. I'm going to whiz through a couple of slides because I can see I've run over time. We are assessing within these seminars whether actually taking people to a prison and seeing it firsthand allows them to address, if not directly, the concerns about the prison conditions and the medium minimum standards, but how they could start a dialogue with the receiving country to see if they can somehow implement the arrest warrant, even though the minimum standards might not be met or they might not be perfect. And so we spend a long time thinking about how we could assess this, and we have had only one chance to do this assessment so far because of the current pandemic conditions. We are not allowed to travel, and we have only had the seminar in Bremen in Germany taking place in October last year, but we have missed the opportunity to have our planned seminars in Bucharest in Romania and in Lisbon, Portugal. I think perhaps we will, if you're interested in reviewing the specifics of what the outcomes were, please do so. The slides will be there later, but overall, I think it's good.
I'm so sorry, but you already reached your time. Can you conclude in 2 minutes or so?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we saw a really good impact on what our judges, our public prosecutors, and academics said about seeing other people's prison conditions, how much this was worth their professional time in having more confidence in implementing the European arrest warrant. And we also saw, very interestingly, that it allowed them to be more curious about using other mutual trust framework decisions tools, such as the cross-border probation tool, which we'd like to promote the use of because it stops people from going into prison in the first place, and the supervision orders, which are another way to stop people from being incarcerated. And there we shall leave it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry that I interrupted you. It's just because we are already a little late on our program, and
Absolutely.
We have one presentation. All right. Thank you for sharing your work with us, and congratulations on your thorough study. Finishing our session, I invite now Rossella Schillaci, I hope I pronounced your name right, who will be talking to us. I don't see you or hear you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. Welcome.
Thanks.
Rossella will be talking to us about her study called An Attenuated Prison for Mothers and Children, a Visual Ethnographic Research in a Special Prison. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I will present you a research that I made. Sorry, it's difficult to to use the system that I made in about children and mother in prison. And this research is was made in two periods. One between 2014 and 2015 in a so-called nursery section in Italy, and this is called Sezione Nido, as it is translated sometimes as mother unit. And the other one is in the following building that has been created after 2015. So what I'm trying to do, when I was in the section, I saw the living condition of children in a section that has been created thanks to a law of the 1975 that allow mother and children to live in the unit. The child can stay there only until 3 years of age. So the main point of the law is to protect the mother-child bond, especially for very small children. And this kind of law, for what I saw, are common in Europe, but there are very different views about the living condition of the children and the age as well. In Italy, since 1975, they can stay in this unit, but the unit should have special features, like to be in the ground floor to allow the children to go outside in the courtyard or in a green area. But for lack of funding, very few mother section in Italy have this kind of features. So after a long debate, a new law was created in Italy. But now I'd like just to show you the trailer, just a few minutes of the film that I made during the previous research, because the previous research was meant to create an observational film, documentary film, focus on the living of a mother with 2 children. I just show. Tell me if you see it.
Dimmi, cos'hai il gioco? Vieni qua. Sei svegliata? Saluti. Buongiorno.
Okay, as I told you, after a long debate, a law of 2011 asked to put the children and the mother in special building called ICAM, that are attenuated prison for mothers and children. So my question, as you can see, is in the place where I've been is a separate building from the female section, and children and mother can stay in the ground floor and the first floor, and then in the second and third floor there are the so-called semi-liberi, half free, and they don't interact to each other. So entrance is separated, also the life inside. So these cells are more like rooms. There are wooden furniture, and also the bars are called lighter. So they are not so heavy as before, but still they need to, for security reason, avoid to mother to escape. I just want to tell you that I changed some picture and put autofocus or very darker, because I know that the conference is also on YouTube, so I prefer to don't show fully the picture. So these are the space. What I understood after all these years of research, that of course the old mother section unity was not a suitable place for the children. The rules inside were not fought for them. Rather, here the situation should be changed, should be different. So I started my field work in January 2020 to see the space and to understand what are the rules here for the children. So there is here a green area that has been made with a lot of effort, economical effort, because it has been created on the asphalt and the cement of the prison. So the methods that I'm following, course, a period of participant observational, but also a project with visual tools. So first of all, the use of pictures, but the aim is to create a VR film, a film in virtual reality, but in a collaborative way. So asking mothers and mainly children to build this film together, and use also workshop with animator and psychologist to try to understand which imagination is in the children. So what do they feel about this place? Is for them a prison? Is for them a home? What would they like to change? And if this attenuates prison an answer for the living of children with the inmate's mother. So I now show the picture that I took with the children in the photographic laboratory, where I asked the children to portray what they love about the place. And of course, what they love was the garden, but mainly their mothers and the fellow and the mates that are there. So what I really like about this moment, that were a moment of joy and play. So all of them could, in these few moments, kind of create a new reality where mother and children will play together and find also some nice aspect of the place where we're living. I asked them to do a portrait and ask them which is their favorite place. And all the children were going near the fence, this wooden fence that they are not allowed to cross. Of course, this is the rule, so they have to stay in this space, but all the time they try to cross it because this is their favorite way of passing the time, just try to cross it. I asked to some of the children why this is the place they like more, and these small children told me that because it's near to the gate, it's near to the way to get out. I asked them what they like also to see from the garden. They say the sky and the grass. But what they miss is to see more sky and more grass, because in prison they say there is very, very few. Also, they wanted to portray their rooms, that is from outside. And this is the view from their eyes. Some of the pictures are made by them, some of the pictures are made by me under their indication. So they told me how to frame. The mother also made the same, like a play, asking them to be portrayed. They asked me to be portrayed, and I asked to choose a place. And all of the mothers say that they like to stay near the window or in the bathroom. And this is the favorite place where we want to stay. And also the laundry room. And here is the only place where we can stay in intimate space, and they can have some privacy. Mother, before the cell was very bare, and they didn't put anything on the wall because they say they don't want the children think that this is the home, their home. Because before we spoke about future, they only living thinking about when they will go out and when will the children will go out. So they want to be clear with them that this is just temporary, this home, let's say, this place where they live. But after I sent them the images, I saw that they were very happy to see, and they start to put images on the window, on the wall, and also on the table. And having this familiar affectiveness. And also the children really want to put, to have their images, their portrait. And we really love the picture we were taking, because what both mother and children told me that they never see each other. So mother don't have the opportunity to saw their children, to have a memory of their children that are growing. And also children that never see each other in a print stamp. So I think that this laboratory can help them to see in this space and to see what is their life now, to concentrate about now, but also to have a memory to send to their relatives. So the importance to be connected with the family, also from an image point of view. For what I saw till now, children really understand that is the prison. They call it prison. They don't call like HIP come on institute. And they understood that there are several laws, rules that are from above that they fight against. Like as I say, the fence is the main rule. They cannot really go outside this fence, but several times they organize proper escape to go outside. Like this, there are several other rules connected to the use of the space inside that are against the children needs. So I think we really need using these instruments of participation with children. It could be pictures or animation to understand how the prison can really be follow their real needs. Since it's very late, I will stop here and leave open for the question later. Thanks.
Thank you, Rossella, for your presentation. Well, I just heard that the closing session for the symposium, it's right around the corner. We had to close. We have to close and cut short the debate phase, but I'll put everybody here because I think we have time for at least one or two questions. And first of all, I'll put on the screen a question from our YouTube viewers. Ridipendi, she has a question for Carolina. What role do prisoners play to create the form that this institutional anticipation takes? Did the document review anything about their involvement to convey expectation, etc.? Carolina?
Yeah, okay, so just to quickly say, in the documents, there isn't a lot of space or conversation about the role of detainees. Though I will say the main role of detainees in anticipation is that the institution anticipates that they are going to take responsibility for their rehabilitation, but that's not an institutional responsibility, that comes on. But also in terms of looking at the discontent that was coming from the guards, the corrections officers, one of the major impacts that was pushing them to boycott, to protest, was actually the high rate of self-harm and suicide that were happening in the prison. And this was something that was making the job much more difficult. And so I don't know if it was a bit of solidarity or just difficulty in the job. So the documents don't really talk about it, but that was definitely a moment where like that action was partially coming from what was happening with the inmates themselves. So, but yeah, I would love to do more work to see more from the perspective of detainees. But with policy so far, they were not very central in a way.
Okay. From the participants, does anyone of you have any questions to the other speakers? No?
Well, I had a quick question about the children in prison. From how long to how long can they be in that space? Like, is it possible that the child is released before the parent is?
Okay, the law allowed them to stay until 6 years of age, but in special case, they can stay until 10 years. So in the morning, they go to school, I forgot to say, but in the afternoon, they have to stay there. And then it really depends on the mother. If the mother decide that the children has to stay outside because, for example, also the father is available or the grandmother, the family system change, they can decide to have the children outside. It's up to the mother. The law says until 10 years old.
Thank you. Very interesting.
On that note, we just received another question for Rossella. Diana asks you, did you find anything about the children experience prisonization and normalizing the prison environment?
There are these two different places, no? As you say, the mother unit is really inside the prison. So when the place where I was the second floor, so was surrounded by the other section of adult female prison. And for what I saw, the presence of children change in somehow the rules of all the system of the prison, because there are children there. So, and the sound, as you may know, it's very, you can really hear the sound of all the buildings. So there are lots of things to pay attention because of the children. In the new system, the building is separate from the other section. So it's really a kind of isolated place, and doesn't really, they are really experimenting to adapt the rules to the needs of the people that they are living there. I don't know if I answer. I try to be quick.
Really has a comment, and it's not actually a question, but she says, I really enjoyed your engagement with images and image making in carceral settings. And you perhaps know Nicole Fleetwood's work already, but just putting out there.
I don't know. Please, if you can give me the contact, would be great. But this is from YouTube.
Yes, this is from YouTube.
But I don't know if there is a way to.
Yeah, maybe if she puts her email address in the comment section,
yeah, thanks.
And then we pass to you, okay?
Yeah, thanks.
I would love to continue with the debate, but unfortunately we have the closing session coming soon at about 6 p.m. in Europe time. So I would like to thank all the speakers, congratulate you on your amazing work, and see you soon.